The human with a missing child, Jacob, stepped off the rusted cargo ship and into the dark market streets of Kiril. The air smelled like burning wires and rotting food. Neon lights flickered overhead, casting strange colors on faces that watched. Him from the shadows, he kept one hand on his sidearm, the other gripping a photo. It was old, folded at the edges, but still clear his daughter's smile, her brown eyes, her name, Ellie. She had been taken 3 years ago. One moment she was at a border camp with other human refugees. The next, gone. No one helped, no one cared. But Jacob never stopped looking. And now, a whisper had brought him here to the edge of civilized space. To a place where lives were bought and sold like broken tools. He walked through rows of cages, pretending to be just another buyer. Inside each cage were beings of all kinds, some with scales, some with fur, some with wide alien eyes, full of fear. One small voice called out, not in a language he knew, but in pain. He stopped, turned, and saw her curled in the corner of a steel cage was a thin alien girl. Trembling, she looked no older than 10, with pale blue skin and glowing silver eyes. Her wrists were bruised, her lips cracked. She stared at him like she expected to be kicked. Jacob looked away. She wasn't his daughter. He didn't come here to save strangers. Take her for cheap, the slaver hissed from behind. She's sick, barely eats, useless for labor, but pretty enough for quiet work. Jacob clenched his jaw, his fingers tightening around Ellie's photo. His daughter had been a child. Too, when they took her, did someone talk about her the same way? He leaned down, met the alien girl's eyes. What's your name? He asked, softly. She didn't answer, only shook her head and whispered something he couldn't understand. The slaver snorted. She doesn't talk much. Maybe mute, maybe scared. Does it matter? Jacob stood, looked around, and made a decision that made no sense. How much? He asked. 10 minutes later, he was walking away from the market with the girl wrapped in his coat. She barely weighed anything, like she hadn't eaten properly. In weeks, people stared but didn't stop him. Nobody cared about one more girl disappearing from the cages. He brought her to an old, abandoned workshop on the edge of town where he'd rented space. He gave her water, then food. She ate like a creature who hadn't known kindness before, chewing slow, afraid it might be taken back. After a while, she fell asleep on the cold floor, arms wrapped around her knees. Jacob sat beside her, back against the wall. He stared at Ellie's photo again, the familiar ache rising in his chest. He hadn't found his daughter today, but something told him this girl, this alien child, wasn't just another lost soul. In the morning, she finally spoke. Just one word. In a broken whisper, but Jacob caught it. Red. Mark, she said, pointing to a scar on his neck, then to her head. Mimicking a man with a red tattoo, Jacob's heart skipped. He had heard of that mark before. The slaver who took Ellie had one just like it. Did you see a human girl? He asked quickly. A girl like this. He showed her the photo. The alien girl stared at it, then nodded slowly. Her lip trembled and tears ran down her cheeks. You saw her, Jacob said, his voice shaking. Where? Tell me where. But the girl only curled up again, her body shaking with silent sobs. Jacob sat in silence, realizing something terrible. This girl had been near Ellie, maybe even kept in the same place, and now those same people would come looking for her. And for him, he checked his weapon, locked the door, and moved to the window. Outside, the lights of the city pulsed like a heartbeat. But Jacob's mind was elsewhere, racing. He didn't come here to be a hero. He came to find his daughter. But maybe, just maybe, saving this alien girl was part of the path to Ellie. And he knew one thing for sure now. Whoever had his child was still out there. And they had no idea a desperate father was finally on their trail. Asterisk, the alien girl remembers face as the alien girl sat near the corner of the room. Wrapped in Jacob's old coat, she hadn't moved much since last night. Jacob watched her from the table, his fingers tapping against the wood. Slow and steady. He didn't know her name, but the image of Ellie in her hands. The way she cried, it haunted him. The girl looked up suddenly, her silver eyes sharp, red mark. She whispered. Again, then drew a quick symbol in the Iran X across a circle. Jacob felt his stomach tighten. That symbol, he had seen it on bounty notices. On slaver flags it belonged to the Crimson Scar. A gang known for trafficking rare species, including humans. Do you remember more? He asked, gently, crouching. Beside her, the girl hesitated, then nodded with her tiny fingers. She pointed toward the east, toward the junk fields. Jacob followed her motion, confused. There? He asked. She was taken there. The girl didn't answer directly, but she blinked and tapped her chest. Then tapped the photo again. Jacob stood and grabbed his gear. He looked down at her, unsure what to call her. You need a name. He muttered. I can't keep calling you, kid. She blinked slowly, confused. He thought for a moment, then said, Luma. Your eyes look like moonlight. Luma? Luma didn't respond. But she didn't reject it either. Jacob took it. As a yes, all right, Luma, he said. Let's go find the truth. They moved through the narrow alleys of Kiro 9. Keeping to the shadows, Jacob kept Luma close, always one step behind him. She didn't speak again. But every so often she'd tug on his coat and point. That's how they found the old cargo yard. It was massive, filled with rusting containers and broken skiffs, the perfect place to hide people or smuggle them. Luma led him to a broken crate half covered in old netting. Inside, Jacob found claw marks and torn fabric. One piece still had a patch that said E. Ryden, his daughter's name. Jacob froze, his hands shaking. She was here, he whispered. She really was here, suddenly. Luma gasped and grabbed his arm. Her body stiffened. Her eyes wide with fear. Faces, she said, trembling. Big ones, watching. Always watching, Jacob turned fast. Drawing his weapon, he scanned the shadows but saw nothing. Still, his instinct screamed. We have to move, he said. Grabbing Luma's hand, but they were already surrounded. 4 figures stepped out from behind crates. Faces covered with metal masks, long rifles aimed at them. One of them spoke in a rough voice. You took what's not yours. Human. Jacob aimed his weapon, but he was outgunned. We're just looking for someone, he said, trying to. Stay calm. A human girl. The masked man laughed. Low and cruel. They all come looking, but they never find what they want. He stepped closer. Hand over the creature, and maybe we won't send your head back to Earth. Luma whimpered and hid behind Jacob's leg. Jacob didn't move. She's staying with me, he said, voice firm. And you'll tell me where my daughter is. The silence that followed was sharp like a blade. Then, without warning, the men attacked. Jacob pushed Luma down and fired, his shot striking one of them in the chest. Sparks flew as the slaver dropped. But the others fired back. Jacob ducked behind a crate. Dragging Luma with him, he was fast, but not fast enough. One shot grazed his arm. Burning through his sleeve, stay down, he whispered, pressing his bleeding arm against his side. Luma looked terrified, but then she reached into her coat and pulled out something smaller, glowing blue orb, before Jacob could ask. She threw it across the field. A second later, it exploded in a burst of light, blinding and loud. The slavers screamed. Disoriented, Jacob took the chance, grabbed Luma, and ran. They didn't stop until they were far from the yard, hiding behind a pile of junk ships. Jacob was panting, wounded, his arms shaking from pain. Luma tore a strip from her own tunic and wrapped his arm as best she could. You saved me. said softly, looking into her eyes. She nodded slowly, her hands trembling. Why? He asked. She touched the photo again and whispered, because she saved me. Jacob's heart broke. His daughter had been here. She had tried to help the others, maybe even saved Luma from a worse fate. Now, Jacob owed her more than ever. He had to keep going, had to follow the trail, and this time, he wasn't doing it alone. Luma was more than a survivor. She was a guide, a witness, and maybe the only one who could help him bring Ellie home. Asterisk, traps, lies. And a hidden map. Jacob's arm still burned from the blaster wound. But he pushed forward. Luma walked beside him, quiet but alert. Her glowing eyes scanned every corner of the scrapyard as they moved deeper into the forgotten edge of Karelnine. She said there was a place on old mining tunnel where she and other children were once taken. A place where she remembered Ellie's voice. The path led them to a crack in a hillside, hidden behind stacks of rusted pods and broken drones. Jacob had to crawl on his stomach to fit through. Luma slithered through easily. Inside was darkness, cold and damp. The walls were metal, the floor covered in old bones and scraps of clothing. Jacob switched on his wrist light, the beam catching strange carvings on the wall. Symbols from different alien species, words scratched. In desperation, one caught his eye. It said help, followed by 5 tally marks. Then the letters ER. He froze, his breath caught in his throat. Ellie, he whispered. Luma touched the wall beside it, her fingers tracing another mark. She sang. Luma said softly, to calm us even when the others cried. Jacob blinked back the heat. Behind his eyes, his daughter had been strong enough to comfort others while trapped here. He clenched his fists, rage burning under his skin. Whoever took her would pay. They went deeper, past rusted support beams and torn cages. In one corner, Luma found a dented locker. Inside was a small box covered in dust, sealed with a strange biometric lock. Luma pressed her hand against it, and the box clicked open. Inside was a small data chip and a torn strip of human cloth pink. With white flowers, Jacob touched it gently. It was hers, he said, voice low. Luma inserted the chip into a port on Jacob's scanner. A flickering hologram appeared, showing a crude map of the outer moons. One location was marked with flashing red, an area called Sector Null. Jacob's eyes narrowed. This isn't just some warehouse, he said. It's a holding station. Luma nodded slowly. Many go there, never come back before they could study more. A sudden noise echoed from behind, footsteps, heavy and fast. Jacob shut off the light, pulled Luma close, and pressed his back against the wall. 3 figures entered the tunnel, flashlights cutting through the dark. Voices muttered in a strange dialect. But Jacob caught one phrase clearly. The human and the girl, bring them in alive. They were being hunted. Again, Luma leaned close and whispered, right tunnel, shortcut. Jacob trusted her and followed. Crawling through a small side shaft, the space was tight, but it opened into a circular chamber filled with broken machines. One of them still hummed with power. A terminal blinked slowly, untouched for years. Luma stepped forward and touched it. The screen lit up with logs, movement reports, names, cargo codes. Jacob scrolled quickly, and then froze. One entry said, Shipment 47, Human Child, Priority Transfer to Void Ship, Black Gate. The date was 2 years ago. It had to be Ellie Blackgate, Jacob said under his breath. Luma looked worried. That ship is cursed? What do you mean? He asked. No one returns, she whispered. It eats people, then disappears. Jacob stared at the screen, then looked at Luma. If that's where they took Ellie, then that's where we're going. Luma looked scared, but nodded. You'll need fuel, weapons, she said. That place. Not just dark, it watches. Jacob helped her gather what supplies they could from the room. including an old pulse detonator and a small energy core, just as they were about to leave. They heard metal clanging above. Someone was dropping into the shaft. "We're out of time," Jacob said. Grabbing Luma's hand, they ran. This time through an old mining chute that led to the edge of the canyon. A long drop stretched before them, but a fallen cargo bridge lay across it. Unstable but passable. Behind them, the hunters shouted. Drawing closer, Jacob went first, testing every step. The bridge groaned under their weight, swaying with a wind. Luma followed closely, trying not to look down, but halfway across. A blast tore through the air, shaking the metal beneath them. Jacob turned just in time to see one of the slavers aiming again. He dove, pulling Luma with him, rolling to safety just as the bridge cracked and fell into the canyon. Breathing hard, Jacob turned toward the now distant tunnel. The slavers were stuck. For now, but they'd return, and stronger. "Come on," Jacob said, lifting Luma to her feet. "We have to disappear." She nodded, her small face serious. Jacob looked at the coordinates flashing on his scanner. Sector null. That was their next stop. But every step now came with danger. He had learned something important. Ellie was alive, but she was being moved like cargo, hidden like a secret. And the ones behind it weren't just slavers, they were part of something bigger. He was in the middle of a trap, but now he had a map and a girl who remembered the faces of monsters. The signal from the broken ship Jacob and Luma traveled through the desert ruins that surrounded Kiral 9's dead zones. The wind carried dust like knives, cutting across their faces. Old machines lay buried beneath the sands, silent memories of wars long gone. Luma walked close beside him. Her head down, her steps light. They didn't speak much. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of fear and focus in her quiet voice. Luma had told him of a place ahead, an old ship, broken, forgotten, hidden between cliffs of glass rock. She said she once heard a voice coming from a Tata human voice. Jacob had doubts, but hope burned inside him. Any clue, any whisper of Ellie, he would chase it. No matter where it led. By nightfall, they reached the cliffs. The wreck lay deep within, a crack in the stone, as if the planet had tried to bury it. Its hull was twisted, scorched, and half swallowed by the earth. Jacob climbed first, pulling Luma up with care. They entered the ship through a gash in the side. Inside, it was dark and cold. Dead lights flickered on the walls, and broken consoles sparked with fading energy. Luma led the way to a chamber where the signal had once come from. There, on the floor, was a shattered recorder, dusty but intact. Jacob wiped it clean and pressed the manual play button. The device buzzed, crackled. Then a young girl's voice echoed from it. "If anyone finds this, we were taken. There were 10 of us. The human girl fought them. She tried to help us escape." Jacob's hands trembled. It wasn't Ellie's voice, but someone who had met her. She said her name was Ellie Ryden. She was brave, not like me. They took her through a gate, a black gate in space. The recording ended in static. Jacob stared at the device for a long moment. Luma watched him closely. Her small hands curled around the edge of her tunic. "Gate is real," she whispered. "Some say it moves, always hiding, but it comes for children. Do you know where it is?" Jacob asked. She nodded slowly. "There's a smuggler's map, only shown in trade stations' deep core." Jacob's brow furrowed. "That's locked behind military-grade security." Luma gave a tiny smile. "Not for me," as they left the ship. Jacob spotted something strange outside, in the rocks near the cliff's edge. Fresh footprints. Someone had followed them, and not long ago. He motioned to Luma. "Stay low." They slipped into a nearby crack between the cliffs and waited. Minutes later, 2 figures appeared, heavily armed, scanning the wreck. They wore visors and armor, marked with the same red X and circle, sigil the crimson scar. One of them kicked the recorder across the floor, growling, the trail's still warm. They were here, they're heading to the Black Gate. The second one replied, Boss said we can't let them reach it. Jacob's grip tightened. Around his weapon, they knew. He looked down at Lumachet, was trembling again. Not from fear this time, but fury. These men took my sister, she whispered. She was never seen again. They waited until the slavers moved deeper into the wreck, then slipped away quietly. Jacob guided Luma through the winding rocks until they reached a ledge overlooking a small trader outpost. They could see cargo ships and refuelers landing. Beyond that was the access terminal Luma had mentioned, the one with black market nav data. Hidden in deep code, getting in wouldn't be easy. Security was tight, and human faces were rare here. But Jacob had a plan. He borrowed a cloak from an abandoned shelter nearby, smudged dirt across his face, and walked with a limp. He entered the station through the lower bay, while Luma crept through a maintenance duct above. Inside, the terminal glowed blue. Jacob approached carefully while Luma used a stolen code key to bypass the lock. Within seconds, the data screen opened, revealing dozens of illegal jump routes and ghost coordinates. Jacob scanned fast until he saw it Black Gate, listed with a warning, active, moving, do not engage. He copied the coordinates and logged out. Just as the last line faded, alarms started blaring. Unauthorized data breach, a voice shouted. Security to level 5. Jacob bolted, grabbing Luma as she dropped from the vent above. Guards chased them through narrow halls, but Luma guided him into the waste chute. They landed hard. In a pile of cold scrap, outside, night was falling again. But Jacob's heart was on fire. He had a direction, finally. A place where his daughter might still be alive. Luma sat beside him, out of breath, her small hands bleeding from the climb. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, then smiled weakly. "We found it." Jacob stared into the sky above, where stars slowly blinked to life, somewhere out there. The Black Gate waited, and beyond it, maybe Ellie, but the enemy now knew he was coming. And this time, they would not just chase him, they would try to kill him. The storm and the betrayal. Jacob tightened the straps on the stolen cargo bike. Luma sat behind him, holding on with one arm, the other clutching the data chip with the Black Gate coordinates. They had only one shot to reach the launch zone outside Kirel 9. A storm was brewing. Thick gray clouds swirled above them, lightning flashing like angry teeth in the sky. They rode fast through the outskirts. Through old factory ruins and dead farms, time was running out, and worse, Jacob's shoulder wound had reopened. Blood soaking through the bandage, he pushed through the pain, focusing only on the path ahead. "We'll reach the launchers by nightfall," he said over his shoulder. Luma didn't answer, but he felt her hand tighten slightly. She was scared, but she trusted him. That was enough. By sunset, they reached a hidden refueling dock carved into the canyon wall. There, an old contact waited. Verlax, a thick-skinned alien with 3 eyes and a sharp grin. Verlax was a smuggler who owed Jacob a favor. "You want to go where?" Verlax said, laughing. "The Black Gate." "You're mad." Jacob placed a pouch of rare fuel cells on the table. "Not mad," he said, "just desperate." Verlax's smile faded. "People disappear near that thing," he muttered. "And now you've brought a child too. She's part of this," Jacob replied firmly. "She's seen what I haven't." Verlax looked at Luma for a long time, then nodded slowly. "All right. I'll take you," he said, "but we move fast and quiet." As Verlax prepared the ship, Luma sat in the corner, drawing strange shapes in the dirt. Jacob sat beside her. "What are you drawing?" "Faces," she whispered. "People who vanished. I want to remember them." Before Jacob could respond, a loud crash echoed through the cave. He jumped up, weapon ready. Verlax lay on the ground, bleeding. Behind him stood a tall figure in black armor, Commander Trask, leader of a Crimson Scar unit. "You never should have come back, Jacob." Trask growled. Jacob aimed his blaster. "How did you find us?" Trask smirked. "Verlax told us everything." Jacob's heart dropped. It was a trap. The smuggler had sold them out, trading lives for credits. Luma let out a soft gasp. Backing away, Jacob stood in front of her. Shielding her body with his own, Trask raised his weapon. "Give me the girl, and I'll let you walk away." "No," Jacob said without hesitation. "You'll never touch her." Trask fired first. Jacob rolled to the side, returning fire. The cave echoed with blasts, sparks flying, rocks crumbling. Luma hid behind the cargo crates, but a stray shot hit the wall near her, knocking her down. Jacob saw her fall and roared, charging forward. He shot Trask in the leg, then tackled him, both crashing hard to the floor. They fought hand to hand, grunting and bleeding. Trask was strong, but Jacob was faster, fueled by rage and fear. He slammed Trask's head into the floor, knocking him out cold. Jacob stumbled to Luma, picked her up gently. Her forehead was bleeding, but she was conscious. "I'm sorry," he whispered, holding her close. She didn't cry, just whispered, "I knew he'd betray us." Jacob blinked. "What?" "I felt it." "Back at the cliff," she said, "but I wanted to believe someone could help us." Jacob carried her to the ship, now half damaged from the fight, with shaking hands. He started the engine. Verlax was dead. The launch pad was falling apart. But it still worked. The ship lifted off shakily, fire spitting from the rear thrusters. Jacob looked down as Kirill 9 faded beneath them. That world had taken his daughter, wounded his body, and tested his soul. But now, it had failed to stop him. Luma lay in the back seat, breathing slow, her face pale. Jacob activated autoflight and went to her side. He cleaned her cut and wrapped it, then whispered, "We're almost there." Her eyes opened, just slightly. "You'll find her," she said softly. "Your daughter. She's waiting." He didn't know how she knew, but he believed her. The ship flew through the stars, past debris fields and signal beacons ahead of them. In the far reaches of space, a massive structure floated, black and alive. It was shaped like a blade with pulsing red lights running down its center. The black gate, it didn't welcome visitors. It swallowed them, but Jacob Ryden wasn't coming to visit. He was coming to take someone back. Asterisk the rescue that cost everything. The black gate loomed before them, floating like a dead god in space. Jacob sat in the cockpit, hands tight on the controls, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The ship's sensors screamed warnings: no signal return, structure unstable, hostile energy field detected. But Jacob ignored them all. He stared at the giant blade-shaped Day-Steed station. Its surface black like oil, red lights beating like a heartbeat. Behind him, Luma slept. Weak from the injury, her breaths were shallow, her skin too cold. Jacob covered her with a thermal blanket, his fingers brushing her forehead. "Hold on," he whispered. "Don't give up now." He guided the ship toward a docking ring, where a cracked airlock hung half open. It was like the station wanted him to enter. As they touched down, the lights flickered around them. The moment the ship powered down, a strange hum began, deep and low, like a voice without words. Jacob slung his rifle over his shoulder and picked Luma up in his arms. He stepped into the airlock, unsure what waited inside. The doors opened slowly, and the darkness swallowed them whole. Inside the black gate, everything was quiet, too quiet. The walls were smooth, almost alive, and pulsed softly under the dim lights. Jacob moved carefully, every step echoing far too loud. Luma stirred in his arms and whispered, "It sees us." "What do you mean?" he asked, stopping. She opened her eyes and looked toward the ceiling. "It watches everything. It remembers." Jacob didn't ask more. He just kept walking. They followed signs written in broken alien code. Storage, processing. Biolab. He turned toward the lab, trusting his gut when he reached the doors. They opened with a hiss, revealing rows of glass chambers. Inside them were children alien and human, some unconscious. Some staring with dull eyes. Jacob's heart dropped. He walked slowly past them, eyes scanning every face. Then he saw her, Ellie, his daughter. She was inside the last pod. Older? Now, her hair longer, but it was her. Her eyes were closed, her body thin, bruised. But breathing. Ellie. Jacob gasped, nearly dropping Luma. He rushed to the controls. Smashing the screen until it unlocked, the pod opened with a soft sigh. And Ellie's eyes fluttered open. At first, she looked afraid, confused. Then her gaze met his dad. She said, voice weak and cracked. Tears filled Jacob's eyes. "I found you," he whispered. Falling to his knees, I never stopped looking. He helped her sit up, holding her carefully. She cried in his arms, her fingers gripping his coat. Like she was afraid he'd vanish, but the moment didn't last. The lights turned red. Alarms began to scream. A robotic voice said, "Unauthorized breach detected. All active subjects to be contained." Jacob stood, lifting Ellie with one arm and holding Luma's hand with the other. They ran, moving through the halls as security bots dropped from the ceiling. Red lasers cut through the air. Walls exploded around them. Jacob shot back, hitting 2 drones. Shielding both girls with his body, they reached the hangar. But it was too late. Enemy ships were docking. Troops flooding in, no way out, he muttered, breathing hard. Blood on his face. Luma looked up, her eyes glowing. "I can open a path," she said. "But I must stay behind." "No," Jacob said firmly. "We all go together." Luma stepped back, placing a small crystal on the floor. Energy burst from it, warping the air, opening a glowing rift. Through the rift, Jacob saw stars. And a safe zone, the edge of a human colony. "Take her," Luma whispered, pushing Ellie forward. "But you," Jacob tried to speak, but Luma shook her head. "I was born in a cage," she said, smiling gently. "But you gave me freedom." "That is enough." Tears burned in Jacob's eyes. He pulled her into a hug. "You are my daughter too," he whispered. Then he stepped through the rift with Ellie in his arms. As they passed through, the portal closed behind them with a flash of light, and the black gate vanished like it had never existed. Asterisk, will he find her before time runs out? The stars above the colony world were calm. Ships passed in silence, the night sky full of quiet beauty. But Jacob Ryden didn't see any of it. He sat on a metal bench just outside the colony med center, his shirt torn, his arms shaking, and blood still drying on his face. In his lap lay Ellie, his daughter, finally safe. Doctors rushed to and from the building, scanning her vitals, giving her oxygen, treating her wounds. But to Jacob, time felt frozen. He had found her, held her, and brought her back, but her eyes hadn't opened again since the black gate. "You're strong," he whispered, stroking her hair, "just like your mother." He swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "She used to sing you to sleep, remember? You were always afraid of the dark, but never afraid to help others." Footsteps approached. Soft but fast. A young nurse touched his shoulder. "Sir, you need to rest. You're losing blood." Jacob shook his head. "Not until she opens her eyes. She's stable," the nurse said gently, but exhausted. "What she went through, she's alive," Jacob cut in, his voice breaking. "That's all that matters." Suddenly, the medical scanner beeped. Ellie's fingers twitched. Jacob sat up straighter, holding his breath, her lips parted. And she whispered a single word, weak but clear, "Dad." Jacob choked on a sob, leaning close. "I'm here. I'm right here." Her eyes opened, slow and heavy. and her gaze found his face. She smiled just a little. "You came for me. I told you I would," he said, pressing his forehead. To hers, no matter what, they stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in silence and safety. But Jacob's mind still burned with one thought, Luma. The alien girl had saved them both. She had stayed behind to open the portal. Knowing she might not survive, she had called him father, and he had let her go. Later that night, Jacob stood alone outside the med center. He stared up at the stars, whispering her name, Luma. "If you're out there, I'm coming for you next." But the black gate had disappeared, and no scanners could find it again. Some said it was destroyed. Others believed it had slipped into another part of the galaxy. Still, Jacob searched. He gathered data, tracked. Rumors spoke to smugglers and pilots. One day, weeks later, while Ellie recovered inside the colony, Jacob got a signal, just a whisper across the void. It came through his old comlink, a code only Luma knew. One word, safe. Jacob stared at it for hours. He smiled slowly, then replied, "Stay where you are. I'll find you." He didn't tell Ellie right away. He waited until she could walk again, until her voice was strong. When he did tell her, she didn't cry. She simply said, "She's my sister too." Together, they boarded a small ship, a gift from the colony's governor, who had heard of Jacob's journey. The ship had a nameplate already printed, the Luma Ray. Jacob smiled. When he saw it as they left the colony behind, Jacob turned to his daughter. "You know this isn't over, right?" he said. Ellie nodded. "We'll find her, just like you found me." Their ship entered the stars, leaving a trail of light behind. Jacob didn't know how long it would take, or what dangers they would face next. But he knew one thing for certain. The girl he saved had helped him find the one he lost. Now, it was his turn to return the favor. Somewhere out there, Luma waited, and a family that had once been broken was ready to become whole again.